Good morning for me. I'm Grant. I'm a bird nerd. I'm a plant nerd, and I'm an angry, grumpy old fellow sometimes. Today, on not just another podcast, explanatory in the title. Just going to have a look at. Going to be pretty low key, pretty relaxed. Going to have a look at a number of videos that I have stumbled across in the last little while. Basically, looking at the way media frame questions or frame conversations, and how things do not get past the production meetings, the editorial meetings that happen in all the large media organisations. Oh, by the way, if you can see something bobbing around on my microphone there, that's Loz. Loz is a lorikeet, a rainbow lorikeet. Have a whole story about how Loz came to be my co-producer and host, the co-host of the show. So anyway, I'll be looking at the BBC. I'm going to look at a couple of good news stories or tips for action. One from NBC, MSNBC, beg your pardon, Rachel Maddow. Caller into the Majority Report, and then we'll be looking at the Humanist Report. The rest is politics, which I highly recommend that you get involved with. Owen Jones looking at the BBC. And, I'll be interrupting and interjecting as frequently as I think we need to add some context. I look at all of these stories from the point of view of an Australian. The reason I'm presenting the things today is particularly for American and just normie mainstream audiences, particularly a show like The Rest is Politics, with really experienced hosts who have lived the life, walked the walk, talked the talk. We're talking about a former Conservative minister in Theresa May, and I think in David Cameron's government too. So Theresa May, David Cameron, and Boris Johnson, I think the first time around. That's a guy called Rory Stewart, former soldier, has been involved in development aid programs all around the world, is still heavily involved in that world, and as a Conservative cabinet minister, not somebody I would generally be in their cheer squad for, but somebody whose views have evolved, and indeed he is now a very strong voice for the dispossessed, the downtrodden around the world. His co-host is Alistair Campbell. Now, Alistair Campbell was the chief of staff in Tony Blair's Labor government. So we're talking sort of 20 years ago. Again, not someone I would always line up with, but I think a really learned voice to come through. So The Rest is Politics is an outstanding podcast. I recommend you get into it. We will be having a good look at that. Who else did I mention? Mike Figueiredo from the Humanist Report, a member of the leftist mafia, which I think is amazing. And first up, though, this is how some shows can use their format to spread the word on how to influence politicians. This is the Majority Report. This was this morning. I was watching it live, 4 a.m., 4:30 a.m. here in Melbourne. The Thursday US version of the Majority Report is hosted by Emma Vigeland. Emma was formerly with the Young Turks, and now there's a bit of a war going on with Emma and the Young Turks producer and co-host Karen Kasparian, and also joining Emma on a Thursday is Brandon Sutton and Matt Binder. Matt Binder is also another member of the leftist mafia, and I would encourage you to follow Matt. He's got really good takes. He's a journo with Mashable, I think. Not BuzzFeed, Mashable, and is pretty deep in the scams of the crypto world. But anyway, here we go. We'll get into the majority report. This is just a caller who had called in and was offering some advice on how to negate the forthcoming cuts into the public lands of the USA.
Of him putting himself over the country.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Joe Biden
repeatedly.
Joe Biden's a terrible person. Like a terrible person. A lot of people didn't want to feel that way when they had to vote for him, but in hindsight, he has a long history.
Okay, we're getting to it. I thought I'd
be like a selfish, narcissist, just like Trump.
Just like Trump. He really is blue Trump. All right, guys. One more call, and then we will get out of here. Calling from a 970 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi there. This is Mimi again from Colorado. How are y'all doing?
Mimi from Colorado. You are the final caller of the day. Doing well.
Well, perfect. I actually just have a PSA. I'm at work right now, so I promise to make it as quick as possible.
No problem.
I used to work in and adjacent to public lands. So would it be okay for me to get out a little message on behalf of some of my past coworkers and friends who are still in the
I'm just sorry, interrupt just a little bit, but what are your thoughts on taking calls live? I'd really like to be doing that here and having people interacting. So anyway, get back here. I can probably do it through the Discord. You can join the Discord if you like. I'll give you the details in a little while.
One more call, and then we will get out of here. Calling from a 970 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi there. This is Mimi again from Colorado. How are y'all doing?
Mimi from Colorado. You are the final caller of the day. Doing well.
Well, perfect. I actually just have a PSA. I'm at work right now, so I promise to make it as quick as possible.
No problem.
I used to work in and adjacent to public lands. So would it be okay for me to get out a little message on behalf of some of my past coworkers and friends who are still in the DOI?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Okay, bear with me here. So first of all, for all my folks who are listening who don't know, the U.S. Forest Service is in part for logging, but it's for regulated logging. The intention of the Trump admin is to deregulate logging in these places by pushing it into the conservation and recreation sectors of National Forest Service. National Forest Service is for logging, conservation, and recreation. Listeners, please remember this when conservatives in your community make arguments to the contrary. And for the actual PSA itself, they'll start with the lands you don't know about, the public lands you're not familiar with. They'll start with your state wilderness areas, the wildlife refuges, the national monuments. You do not have to be a lobbyist or a politician to fight this. Just use these lands, use them, support friends of groups. Almost every public land has a friends group that volunteers, hands money and time to fill in governmental gaps, which are now, of course, bigger than ever. Buy stuff at the visitor centers, picnic, fish, walk, hike, go birding, have 4th of July parties and birthday parties there, cookout. They all have grills. You don't have to be outdoorsy in any regard. Take pictures, go on scenic drives, sit in your car in the parking lots, play Pokemon Go. It's that simple. Just use them and talk about using them.
That's great advice.
My second part here is appeal to the Trump voters' sense of entitlement and vanity. The White River National Forest, for example, in Colorado, is the most recreated in national forest in the U.S. and is the backyard of one of the Richie Rich's favorite winter vacation destinations, Breckenridge and Aspen. The Sandias and Tongass National Forests are the backdrop of some
sorry to interrupt really quick. Do they get, when they're doing, something that's incredibly water intensive, and what you need dams and fresh water for is making snow, especially as the climate continues to heat up. I wonder if that has any role in making snow for some of the Richie Rich
it has
skiing.
A huge effect. Yep. Any threats to White River National Forest or anything relative to that, as Emma is saying, will in fact greatly affect skiing and snowboarding greatly. Thank you, Emma. Fantastic point. Tongass National Forest, Sandias, those are the backdrops of a lot of people's favorite TV shows, both fictional and reality. The Sandias are the backdrop of Breaking Bad. So remind people of that. Remind people they're coming for your entertainment. They're devaluing your neighborhood and your home, lowering the resale value, robbing you of your cabin retreats and lakeside summers and beautiful ski vacations, etc. And it's all because these people, the mega rich, are greedy. Please phrase it this way. It is that simple. And my very last point here, thank you so much for your time, y'all, is for hunters in specific. You are our first and last hope. Our public lands were established for you, as many of you know, and you'll be the last ones in it should the worst come. So please do your duty by counting fish, wildlife, keep track of all those pesky invasives that you hate, and most importantly, I beg of you to report every single deer and elk that you even suspect of having chronic wasting disease. Educate yourself on it if you don't know about it, because without humans in our public lands, we now risk decimating the populations of entire species of deer and elk. So long-winded, but thank you, Emma. I am repping the Majority Report hat everywhere. I love her.
Keep it
up. So cute.
Keep it
and
up.
Absolutely. And anyway, appreciate y'all so much. Left is best.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate the call and the advice, Mimi. Thank you.
Yeah, good opportunity.
Left is best indeed. That's an example of how, if you are committed to a format and to not so much being the star of the show, you can get some really useful information. There was something I missed the first time when I was watching it live in there too. Chronic wasting disease for deer and elk. I didn't even know about that in the US. So that's what all these small government people need to understand, that there are functions that are necessary to preserve the populations of wild species and the health of those populations, but also in an effort to stop the possible transfer to domestic stock. Anyway, that was the whole point of popping in the Majority Report. All the links to the shows I'm featuring are in the description on the YouTube. So please give them a follow. The Majority Report, I think, is a really beneficial outlet. They know what they're talking about. They're well read. They're well researched. Just get into it. So about 22,000 people had seen that this morning. There'll be now it's an unlisted video because it was for members only or for live viewers at the time.
Folks to propagandize any hunters or outdoors people.
Sorry about that. Laws can be a bit cause of a bit of havoc, but when you've got a pet that demands a lot of attention. Well, you're not really a pet, are you, Loz? Because I never went and bought you or sort you out. You sort me out. Some people can have a dog that just lies in the background or a cat, but no, I've got a lorikeet. So bear with it. Bear with me. Bear with Loz. Next up is something you don't see often on a mainstream platform. Now, this is MSNBC. Generally, I don't find their stuff worth clipping or playing or really talking about. But in the 100 Days transition show or shows that Rachel Maddow has been doing each evening on MSNBC, she has been on fire. Now, what I want to do with this, what I want you to get from it is that it's not really good enough for people to be saying there's nothing we can do, we're powerless. No, nobody's powerless, and your voice can count. And let's just roll into this. I'll probably let this mostly run and talk about it at the end, because Maddow does a fantastic job of summing up what was going on here. And no, we're right to go. Get rid of that. All right, this will be better. Let's go.
I'm happy to report that Congressman John Larson is definitely back and at full strength. He has been eating his proverbial Wheaties. He appears to be very hydrated, very energized, and may I suggest you get out of his way. Watch this.
Men and women on this committee are good people. They're honest and caring people. And that's why I do not understand why you would relegate this committee to no longer being of significance and resort to saying you will do whatever Elon Musk and Donald Trump tell you to do. Where's the independence of the committee? Where's the legislature? We're an equal branch of government. And you start off with a blather, and yet look at the empty seats here. Where's Elon Musk? I'm sure he's a genius and is a very credible person because of the wealth he's accumulated. But that does not put him above the law or the responsibility to come before this committee in this Congress. If he's so great, if these plans and all the fraud and abuse that he's found are so evident, why isn't he here explaining it? You know why. Because he's out to privatize Social Security. He's been on television the last couple of days talking exactly about Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and what he intends to do. Privatize it. The American people, some of them may have been born at night, but not last night. People are aware of this. Every single one of your districts. Now you have someone coming in to privatize a system, something you have longed to do going back to 1982, because Elon Musk thinks that this is the best thing to do. President Trump has called Social Security a scam. Elon Musk, as chairman, as Mr. Neal said, called it a Ponzi scheme. Ask that of the people in your district. Ask that, Mr. Smith, of the more than 198,000 people in your district who rely on Social Security, and you won't even let the person who's planning to privatize it, who's telling the big lie in front of everyone, in bold as he possibly can, saying, this is what we're going to do. The Congress is in our back pocket. We don't even have to come before them and testify, because we control the House, we control the Senate, and we control the presidency. And it's the tyranny of the executive. It's why these resolutions were first adopted back in 1789, because the founding fathers knew that the executive branch does not have total authority over the legislature unless you have a willing party that says, No, we're going to do exactly what you tell us to do, Mr. Musk and Mr. President. It doesn't matter to our constituents. It doesn't matter how much money they are not going to receive. We're not even going to tell them the truth about what's going to happen to them. They administer to over 70 million people in the nation's #1 anti-poverty program for the elderly and children. Shame! Shame! Can't bring people in front of this body? If he's right, if they're so good, if they're so just, why aren't they here telling the American people about it? They're not, because you know the truth. It's about privatization. I yield back.
That is veteran Democratic Congressman John Larson of Connecticut, just ripping the bark off today about Social Security and what Republicans are really doing here.
I'll just jump in for a second. How long since if you're watching mainstream media? I mean, I share a house with someone who loves watching the standard news on a particular channel here in Melbourne, and you never see politicians keeping it real. You certainly don't get an extended clip with a bit of context. You might get one or two sentences, but that was a bit refreshing. It's the reason that I was even paying attention to MSNBC in this clip. I thought it was heartening to see it. Unfortunately, MSNBC is slipping into sort of irrelevance a bit in terms of its overall ratings, but that's where the constant presence online and continually pushing things out into the internet is starting to make a difference. But anyway, we'll let Matt Hour. We're about halfway through this clip. We'll let Matt Hour sum it all up. About there. Just get the end of the congressman again.
If he's right, if they're so good, if they're so just, why aren't they here telling the American people about it? They're not, because you know the truth. It's about privatization. I yield back.
That is veteran Democratic Congressman John Larson of Connecticut, just ripping the bark off today about Social Security and what Republicans are really doing here. And indeed, as he was ripping that bark off in Congress, look at what the Washington Post was publishing just down the road. Quote, Social Security facing pressure from DOJ weighs big cuts to phone service. Agency considers ending phone program that is used by millions of elderly and disabled Americans. One gobsmacked Social Security Administration employee told the Post today that this radical change, this radical cut to services that they were moving on in the Trump administration, quote, would be the single largest service disruption in agency history ever. The single largest service disruption in Social Security ever. Elon Musk's plan for Social Security was to, quote, end telephone service for claims processing, instead directing elderly and disabled people to the internet and to in-person field offices. Quote, the agency's toll-free number is a mainstay for older customers who do not have online access or who have trouble navigating the internet. About 40% of the claims that get made to Social Security are made over the phone, using this phone line that Elon Musk now wants to kill. 40% of the claims at the agency. And naturally, this move to close the phone line and instead force old people and disabled people to go in person to in-person field offices, naturally that comes as Donald Trump is firing 7,000 people who work at Social Security and closing tons of the aforementioned field offices. President Biden's Social Security administrator, former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley, ripped the bark off himself in his comments to the Post on this planned cut. Quote, "It would certainly appear," he said, "that they're trying to break the capacity of the agency to serve its customers. And I suppose if they're trying to dismember the agency, liquidate its assets, sell pieces of it to their billionaire friends to run, they have to discredit the agency in the eyes of its customers, and they do that by breaking its ability to serve." The Post says, quote, "The Doge-driven proposal to shift all claims processing online and to in-person offices has spurred pushback internally," employees said, and from outside experts, for the same reasons, that it would be likely to imperil millions of Americans' ability to receive their earned benefits. This is what they're doing. This is what's going on. And so this is what happens today. Congressman John Larson, who I just showed you, screams his freaking head off in Congress about it this morning. Screams at them. And then at noon, the Washington Post publishes this horror movie script about their plan, indeed, to rip the guts out of Social Security. Beyond firing everybody, which they're already doing, right? Beyond closing the field offices, they're now making it so that old and disabled people literally cannot call anyone to find out what's going on. But then you know what happened? They caved. They decided not to do it. Don't let anybody tell you that pushback doesn't work. Don't let anybody tell you that yelling and making a fuss doesn't matter, or that journalism doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't always matter, but honestly, it's the only thing that ever does. Every single time you don't try, you lose. But sometimes when you try, you win. It's the reason it's worth trying. And so now this is the headline at the Washington Post as of 7 o'clock tonight. Quote, "Social Security scraps far-reaching cuts to phone services after Post report." Quote, "The Social Security Administration late Wednesday abandoned plans it was considering to end phone service for millions of Americans filing retirement and disability claims after the Washington Post reported that Elon Musk's U.S. Doge service team was weighing the change. The shift would have directed elderly and disabled people to rely on the internet and in-person field offices to process their claims, curtailing a service that 73 million Americans have relied on for decades to access earned government benefits. They were going to do this. We did good journalism exposing that this is what they were planning on doing. And the resulting eruption scared them and made them not do it. Pushback matters. Exposing what they are doing matters. Demanding Republicans fill the chair, show up, invite the witnesses in, let us question people, demanding that Republicans actually answer for what Trump is doing, Republicans actually explain themselves, try to justify what it is he's doing. It turns out those demands can have an effect.
Yeah, so that is a really reasonable presentation, I think, of a policy that Conservatives are always trying to push.
I'm happy to report
shrink government.
That Congressman John Larson is definitely back and at full strength.
Stop, Rachel. And then when they shrink the government to a point where the services are not able to be delivered adequately to the clients, the stakeholders, then they say, "Oh, look, government doesn't work. We should get rid of more of it," which is blooming ridiculous. Now, I'm going to talk about an Australian situation here in a minute. It just came to me, and I've just drummed it up. We'll get to it. But I first want to go to the Humanist Report. Mike Figueiredo. Mike is a sociologist. As I mentioned before, he's also a member of the Leftist Mafia. The Leftist Mafia do a Friday evening live stream in the US It comprises, they always have a guest, an interesting guest, but Matt Binder, who's based in New York, David Dole, who is an experienced video producer and reporter from, I think he's in Toronto, in Canada. Lance from the Surfs. Lance is, he's a good activist. Trans rights, LGBTQ plus rights, Indigenous rights. His mother is Indigenous Canadian. He's in Vancouver. Who else is there? I have Rebecca Azor, who works, been working in TV. She's a journalist. Is a Haitian American, so an interesting perspective comes into the show there. And they also have Ariana Jasmine, who is I think she's a Palestinian American. She's certainly a Muslim American. I'd need to double check that. I think she's a Palestinian American. Pretty big on TikTok, Ariana Jasmine. And then they have great guests, and they generally will review topics in generally the American media, but with Lance and David Dole on the panel, there's often a fair bit of Canadian or other world politics, and Rebecca has a slant that is generally not present in the sort of milquetoast white media. So they're really, really good. So why I want to show you the Mike Figueredo clip, and he's looking at a shift with Pod Save America. Pod Save America is a very influential podcast in the liberal space in the US, and some of the people who produce and host Pod Save America worked in the Barack Obama administration and on the campaigns, but they've been well connected with middle of the road left, conservative or corporate Democrat politics for a number of years. And they have sabotaged the runs of progressive candidates. And they're quite popular. I should have looked up their exact stats, but they are quite popular. But they are diabolical. Until now. And Mike Figueredo is examining that now. If you're a fan of Bernie Sanders and that left flank of the movement in America, you will enjoy this.
I posted a picture of the Bernie rally and said, I thought this was inspiring because it genuinely was.
I saw you quote tweet it and I was like, oh, he must be shadowboxing his mentions on this one.
You bet I was. You bet, not shadowboxing, boxing. But there's every reply under the book in the Sun to explain why it wasn't actually inspiring and actually quite bad.
What?
Yeah, just sort of why is Bernie alone? Why aren't other Democrats doing this? Bernie's too old. Why isn't he with somebody else? This isn't...
Sometimes I feel like we're running a political campaign with 5,000 people who all have an equal say in the campaign all the time, and they're all strategists.
But the thing about it... Well, online. But the thing about it is there was none of that feeling in the actual
of course
event,
because it's real life.
And in real life, what was there at that event? It was very diverse, age, all demographics, and there were people there that have been Bernie fans forever. There were people there that had never been to a political rally before. They were all very excited to be there. They weren't checking to find out how long they'd been a Bernie backer, or if any Pete Buttigieg supporters had managed to sneak in, right? None of that exists in the real world, right? There's nobody Bernie.
Do I hear high hopes in the background?
You like Bernie now, but you were part of the DNC coup in Iowa in 2016.
Yeah, that's
like
people who
were. Yeah.
People who are early into a band who scold you if you come to it later. It's that's not fun
right,
for anybody.
The two positions can't be why isn't the Democratic Party embracing Bernie's message, and oh sure, you like Bernie now, where were you before? It's those two things are in opposition.
Sometimes our leftist friends don't build the biggest tent, and we all should just welcome people into the Bernie Club.
Fuck you.
That was a conversation that took place on the March 11th episode of Pod Save America, and as you saw, the Pod Save bros were a little bit frustrated with the leftists who are reluctant to embrace their newfangled status as Bernie bros. And look, I get it. I think that gatekeeping is antithetical to movement building, and welcoming people to our side once we win them over is crucial. So I, for one, am happy to see so many Johnny-come-latelys finally give Bernie Sanders the credit that he deserves. But on the other hand, I'll admit that it is frustrating to see so many liberals like James Carville, Chris Murphy, and the Pod Save bros embrace Bernie Sanders now that it's too late. I mean, we had 2 chances to make this man the president of the United States, and a lot of people who are now embracing him were the same ones who were fighting the hardest to stop him. And that includes at least one of the Pod Save bros. For example, in 2018, ahead of Bernie's second presidential run, he was building public support for Medicare for All, and it reached new highs in terms of popularity. But all of a sudden, as journalist Lindsay Ballant points out, a nonprofit called United States of Care was founded by insurance industry advocates to stop the momentum that Bernie Sanders was building for Medicare for All. And one of the founders of this nonprofit is none other than Jon Favreau from Pod Save America. And the policy changes that this group was pushing for were good, but they were incremental and conveniently allowed for our corrupt for-profit system to remain in place. And these were the positions that ended up becoming mainstream in the Democratic Party. And now it's unclear if the party even supports a public option. This group does not support a public option. And as Lindsay Ballant goes on to explain, we don't hear much about this nonprofit anymore because they were materialized to do one job: kill momentum for Medicare for All, and they basically accomplished that goal. So I think things like this, in part, explains why there's still a lot of skepticism for the Pod Save bros in particular. I don't think that many Bernie bros hold animus towards their viewers, because those are obviously just regular working class people. But I think that these guys get the impression that the left is less welcoming than they are in actuality because of their personal experience. But I'd argue that's not really the case. Sure, they get criticism, but from my standpoint, the criticism that liberals get is mostly saved for liberal pundits and the Democratic Party insiders and consultants and strategists, not Democratic Party voters. But having said that, I think that even folks like them should be welcomed into the coalition, but there's going to be skepticism because of the role that they played in trying to suppress progressive momentum. But I will say that, one thing that they could do that would be seen as a good faith gesture towards the left, if they're serious about adopting a more Bernie Sanders style of politics, is to endorse actual fighters who want to do what Bernie Sanders is trying to do, who's not afraid to confront fascists. The person I'm talking about, who I'd love to see them endorse, is Zohran Mamdani, a New York State Assembly member who is currently the main competitor to Andrew Cuomo in New York City's mayoral race. And if you think that Bernie's politics are the way forward and you're serious about that, allow me to introduce you to the next iteration of this style of politics.
Tom Homan? When we asked Tom Homan, all he had to answer for that cruelty was a smirk. Because there is no answer for taking a man from his pregnant wife, who is due to deliver their newborn child in a month, from their Columbia University apartment, a day after that same man, Mahmoud Khalil, wrote to Columbia University and said he feared for his life. The cowardice that is on display across our city and our state is unacceptable. That's right. New Yorkers are looking to us. They are looking to their leaders for courage and for conviction. And what they are finding instead is collaboration. And that is just simply unacceptable.
And that is exactly the kind of person that we need right now. So many elected Democrats aren't just refusing to fight, which would be bad in and of itself, but they are actively collaborating with fascists. And the cowardice that he's calling out, this unwillingness to speak out for Mahmoud Khalil, who's a political prisoner of the Trump administration, is exactly the problem with modern day Democratic Party individuals. I'm talking about the electeds, not the voters. Now, previously, Democratic Party strategists and probably, the Pod Save America bros would fight to stop somebody like Mamdani from ever getting power. But I mean, if you're serious about beating fascists and you think Bernie Sanders truly does have the ticket to victory for Democrats, Prove it to us. Support Mamdani. Bring him on your show. Mainstream him with Democratic Party voters who are desperate for fighters like him. And it doesn't really matter where you land politically within the Democratic Party's base. Most voters in this bloc understand that we need politicians who stand for something. And I get the sense that the Pod Save Bros now feel the same way. At least that's what I took away from their commentary about Bernie Sanders.
But also good for Bernie for filling a space and like giving people a place to go to get excited and fired up.
Well,
I think that's great.
In House districts that Republicans won by only a few votes.
And more Democrats should be doing that.
Absolutely.
Whether you like Bernie's politics or not, here's a guy who has not changed anything about himself and doesn't want to, doesn't care how you feel about it, is completely comfortable in his own skin, and he's going around drawing these big crowds, just old traditional style. Just go do a rally and you talk to people and everyone's like, this is great. He didn't figure out like the TikTok trend. He didn't figure out exactly how to like do an explainer video that's like, vertical video.
He's not like, we got to stop the oligarchy. No cap. So that right there tells me that they understand that Bernie's politics, that's the way forward. So this is why I think that you should support candidates like Mamdani, because he is charting this path that Bernie Sanders has been charting for decades. Now, I know that John in particular doesn't agree with Bernie's politics. That's why he said that. And it's also why he co-founded a nonprofit to kill momentum for one of Bernie Sanders' signature policies. But despite that policy disagreement, I will say I appreciate them saying that authenticity matters, because that right there is recognition that something has to change. You can't do politics the way that consultants and strategists have trained modern day Democrats to do politics. It just doesn't work. It's outdated. And this is something that John himself, to his credit, pointed out in that same podcast by making this recommendation to Democratic Party politicians.
For at least this year, just do your politics like you're not going to look at the reaction or you're not going to read advice. You're just doing it based on what you think and believe and how you feel about things. Just like try it for a little bit.
And I agree with that in theory, but the problem is that a lot of Democratic...
Yeah, how about all politicians try that? Actually, tell people what you think and what you feel. That wouldn't be that hard, would it? Anyway, Mike's got a good take.
In theory, but the problem is that a lot of Democratic Party politicians don't have any core beliefs. For all intents and purposes, they are NPCs parroting the pre-programmed dialogue tree options given to them by their corporate donors. But that's where I think that this disconnect is coming from. John presumably isn't seeing that the reason why Bernie Sanders comes off as so authentic is because he hasn't been corrupted by corporate donors, because he doesn't have any. Now, juxtapose him with somebody like Kamala Harris, for example, and you begin to see why people felt like she didn't really stand for anything and why her campaign wasn't connecting. I mean, she was trying to be the president for everybody, and that sounds good, but when you dive in and you see why it's contradictory, you begin to understand why nobody really took her seriously. She wanted to be the president for CEOs and the president for workers at the same time. She wanted to be the president for moderate Republicans and liberal Democrats at the same time. That style of politics does not work. It's incoherent. I get that Democrats talk about how good it is that they have a big tent, but that's actually bad. They need to shrink the tent and actually have a coherent ideology that they fight for. People want politicians who stand for something, even if they don't necessarily agree with everything that these politicians are talking about. Just have thoughts of your own, and that will go a long way. I mean, if every thought that you have is filtered through pre-written talking points and pre-polled or focus group tested, nobody's going to believe that you have any unique thoughts of your own. They're just going to see you as another empty suit, willing to say whatever you think you need to say to get elected. And even Tim Walz recently came out and said that the campaign played it way too safe. And to their credit, the Pod Save Bros agreed with that sentiment.
Tim Walz is right. They did play too safe. I mean, I remember when he was named as vice president, everyone was really excited to hear him do a bunch of interviews, and then he was bottled up for half the campaign, and that was obviously a mistake.
Yeah, the being afraid of taking on some of the more controversial like policy issues that the Trump campaign was making big, under the assumption that, under the hope that you ignore that, you push that down, you campaign on your most effective messages. That was like a smarter, safer thing to do. Like, it turns out that didn't work.
Totally agree. But with that being said, I think that it's worth noting that we can tell the difference between a politician who's genuine and a politician who's trying to fake it to make it. That's why you can't just start cursing more or rolling up your sleeves more frequently to try to come off as one of the normies, because that's not going to work. We can smell the bullshit. One example is Gavin Newsom. You know, one of the criticisms of Kamala Harris's campaign was that she didn't do enough long-form interviews on podcasts and whatnot. And a lot of people thought that she avoided that because she didn't want her ideas to be challenged, which I think is true. But Gavin Newsom sees this, and what he takes away from that is, oh, I should start my own podcast and exclusively platform right-wing fascists and agree with them on things. But that's not why people were criticizing Kamala Harris for not doing more long-form interviews. Not that the Pod Save Bros are defending Gavin Newsom. Just as an example, like, the reason why people thought that she should do more long-form interviews was because we wanted to hear more than just the same 8 pre-planned talking points that we heard over and over and over again. We wanted to know what she stood for, what were her individual beliefs. And the fact that you're able to memorize and recite more talking points than her doesn't convince anybody that you're more authentic, Gavin. Strategically pivoting to the center ahead of a presidential run doesn't scream authenticity. You just look like a fucking opportunist. And try as you might, you can't fake authenticity. So that's the point that I'm trying to make. In telling Democrats to be more authentic, I hope that the takeaway isn't, well, I'll just go off script more, but stick to, you know, a general outline of what I want to say. No, just like, be humans. That's what we want. We want you to be human beings, not robots. Just tell me what you think. And if I disagree, I'll disagree. I'll tell you my thoughts, right? But don't be a fucking robot. That's the point that I want to drive home, because I think there's going to be a lot of politicians who are going to try to exploit this anti-establishment fervor that's building on the left now too. But we don't want a phony. We don't want a huckster. We want somebody who is genuine, like Bernie Sanders. You know, you either have authenticity or you don't. But the reason why people crave it in the first place is because we want to know that you're as pissed off as we are. We want to know that you actually care about saving the country as much as we do, and that you're not just saying what you're saying to placate us, to position yourself for a run for a higher office in the future. We want you to be a human. That is what is missing. And it's not just about what you say, it's about what you do and what you plan to do, and whether or not we think you're going to follow through on the things that you say you want to do. Because we've heard promises from politicians, and year after year, the country continues to circle the drain, and the best we get is some crumbs here and there, some incremental fixes around the edges. We want somebody who is going to come in with a bold, progressive agenda that you
see that dude sitting next to Barack Obama? That was one of the Pod Save dudes, I believe. I think that was John Favreau. Anyway, Mike's nailed it. This is exactly the way I feel about the politics that we've been experiencing in Australia, and our current government is an example in disappointment. Although they haven't been bad at everything. On a lot of stuff, they've been magnificent, but a lot of their key policies that they ran on, they just put aside, and that alienates a large flank of their party, and then they wonder why there is so much movement to the independents and why the crossbench is growing. When I talked about the crossbench, I think in yesterday's video, day before. Anyway, we'll go back into that. I'm going to change a little bit what I said I was going to do. After this, I'm going to show you something about how the right wing and the nutcases and the Fruit Loops get energized by massive amounts of money. That's just a teaser. We'll get through Mike, and then I'll tell you what's happening in Australia. And then for tomorrow, I'm going to prepare something and show you how the consultants and the advisors of what's happening on the far right in Australia are the same people who are behind the kooky shift left in Britain and have been involved in New Zealand and, well, many other places. But let's get back to the Human Rights Report.
Has sincere beliefs about how to make the country better. And the reason why Bernie Sanders is resonating with so many people is because you can sense that this is what he wants. He has beliefs about how to make the country better. He's deeply troubled by what he's seeing in the country. In fact, in that same episode of Pod Save America, one of the hosts interviewed Bernie Sanders and told him that he sensed that there was this sort of gravity in his voice that he'd never heard before when talking about the danger that Trump poses, and Bernie explained why he's so scared in a really eloquent way.
These are, the scariest times in my lifetime, that's all. I mean, I think that's objectively the truth. It is not just they want to give tax breaks to billionaires and cut programs for working people. Frankly, that's happened before.
Yeah.
But you combine that with the power of the oligarchy in general. It's not only the power of money, it's also combined with that, the movement toward authoritarianism.
And he's right. And you can sense the sincerity in his voice. So this is why so many people are flocking to Bernie Sanders again, and politicians like him, because he cares. He cares as much as we do. That's evident, which is something that you can't say about Democratic Party leaders like Hakeem Jeffries or Chuck Schumer and Ken Martin. Unlike most politicians, Bernie Sanders isn't doing what he does to get ahead. He's not doing the Fight the Oligarchy tour because there's something to be gained by it. He's too old to run for president, and he's not getting paid to do this, I'm sure. He's doing it because he's as desperate as we are to stop fascism. That is what we want. We want politicians to genuinely care. And he is giving Americans one more chance to try to understand that there is power in numbers and there's value in working class solidarity. And he explained this in that same interview. And I want to highlight that because what he says is very important.
Because of the corrupt campaign finance system. If some Republican today stands up and says, you know what? I am not going to cut Medicaid in my district to give tax breaks to billionaires. You know what happens? The next day, Musk says, guess what, fella? We're going to primary you. I got endless amounts of money. You're in trouble. These guys are scared to death. They're scared to death of Musk. But we're going to have to force them to make a choice. They can be scared to death of Musk, or they can be scared to death of their own constituents.
Let's hear that again. I think that is the key point. Bernie Sanders, independent senator from Vermont, has this down pat. And this is something we need to take on board everywhere. Politicians, I think we hear the mantra often that politicians work for their donors and that's where all the influence is. Well, they can either be scared of their donors or scared of the voters. And we need to make them scared of voters again. So let's play that again. Interesting that a guy who is, I think, 82 years old is saying this is the scariest time of his life. That includes the height of the Cold War.
Some Republican today stands up and says, you know what? I am not going to cut Medicaid in my district to give tax breaks to billionaires. You know what happens? The next day, Musk says, guess what, fella? We're going to primary you. I got endless amounts of money. You're in trouble. These guys are scared to death. They're scared to death of Musk. But we're going to have to force them to make a choice. They can be scared to death of Musk, or they can be scared to death of their own constituents. That's the choice we're going to give them.
And that right there is a crucial message. He also pointed out at a different point in the interview that fascists like Elon Musk and Donald Trump, they want you to become demoralized. They want you to feel hopeless because when you stop resisting, that's when they really win. That makes their jobs easier. But what we have to do right now is recalibrate. Right now, since money buys elections, politicians are more responsive to their donors than they are to voters. So Bernie is trying the best that he can to change that dynamic, even if it might be too late. And thankfully, more Democrats who actually do care are following his lead. That includes individuals like Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who is also planning to go to red districts to speak directly to the constituents of Republican members of Congress to offer them an alternative vision for the country. Now, this is what you have to do to cultivate working class solidarity among working people. It's something that works. And do you want to know how I know that it works? Because Fox News is already talking about this strategy, and they're trying to throw a wrench in their plans to bring working class people together. For example, Greg Gutfeld, he said that he doesn't know how somebody like AOC could even have a conversation with Republicans because of her hyperfixation on identity politics. Listen to what he says.
You know, curious how you can have this fabled, honest conversation liberals always talk about when each conversation is terminated with those load-bearing phrases like racism, xenophobia, transphobia, sexist. How can you have a conversation? Let's say you go to a Republican area and you talk about their resistance to trans in sports. Where does that conversation lead? Do you immediately say what you always say? That's transphobic? Because that's not where the conversation ends. That's where it starts. It's not transphobic. It's common sense. Can she have that? The problem for the Dems is that whether it's border, DEI, or crime, the social justice lingo begins and ends with racist, 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 racist.
And this is a classic divide and conquer strategy that so many Democrats fall for. I'm looking at you, Greasy Gavin. Republicans are trying to bait Democrats into throwing their own constituents under a bus in order to debate them on their own terms. It's a pretty effective strategy, and I want to show you what I mean. So the ACLU has tracked more than 500 anti-LGBTQ plus bills across the country just in the 2025 legislative session alone. And when we respond by defending queer people from the erosion of their civil rights, the right subsequently accuses us of being obsessed with LGBTQ issues to the detriment of other issues, especially kitchen table issues. So they manufactured the situation where if Democrats stand down and let Republicans target this minority who's vulnerable, well, they piss off their base who rightfully feels abandoned, who expects more, who expects to be defended since they support this party. But if Democrats respond and they defend LGBTQ plus people from these attacks, well, then that's just proof that they care more about they/them than you and I, as the Trump ad puts it. Like, they're directly trying to pit working class people against each other. They're trying to create a lose-lose situation for Democrats. They're forcing Democrats to constantly play defense. And Democrats fall for it way too much. But the goal here is to get regular people to think that politics is a zero-sum game and that every second Democrats spend defending trans rights is a second that they could have spent defending working-class cis people. And this isn't the only group that they target, by the way. I mean, during the Reagan era, he would conjure up images of welfare queens, i.e. black single mothers, and claim that they're not working and they're sucking up all the resources that you're paying for with your tax dollars. And it was an effective tactic to get white people mad at black people. This is what they have always done. They benefit from bigotry and racism and xenophobia and transphobia and homophobia and all the phobias and isms. The goal is to pit working class people against each other and have them fight each other so that way they never see that their struggles are interconnected. Because if we're fighting each other, then nobody's going to pay attention to the people at the top robbing us blind. It's the oldest trick in the book. And do you want to know who warned us about this right-wing strategy decades ago? Bernard Sanders.
If you are the Republican leadership, and this is what your goals are to give huge tax breaks to the very richest people in this country. Your goals are ultimately to privatize Social Security so that Wall Street can make money from that. Privatize Medicare so the insurance companies can make more money. Privatize education. Do away with public schools. If those are your goals and you said that to the American people, you think you get a lot of lower? There are many members of the Congress today, Republicans, who not only will not raise the minimum wage, which is $5.15 an hour, you know what they will tell you, honestly? They believe in abolishing the minimum wage. Did you know that? Check it out. Telling you the truth. So that if Americans can work for $3 an hour or $2 an hour, not a problem. Now, if you had an agenda like that and you went before the American people, tax breaks for the rich, destruction of Medicare, destruction of Social Security as we know it, lowering the minimum wage or abolishing it, how many votes do you think you'd get? Not a whole lot. Maybe the richest 1% would vote for you. But that's not a lot of votes. So what do? I've got a problem. You package it. How do you package it? And here's, I want you to pay attention to me. What you do is divide people up. When you asked me your question, how do I get elected? I said, I try to bring people together. We fight for women's rights. We support the rights of minorities. We support the rights of workers. We bring the majority of people together. And occasionally, honest people will have differences of opinion. In this room, there will be differences of opinion. So on those issues, we bring people together. Now, what do the Republicans try to do? We divide people up by races. Affirmative action becomes one issue. All them black people are getting the jobs that we white people used to have. Split people, working class, white against black, instead of working together to create decent jobs for all. Those uppity women now, they want the right to choose We'll split people on the abortion issue. We'll split people up on the gun issue. We'll split people up on religious issues. Do you follow what I'm saying? So you split people up, and then they end up, if you're a middle-class person, voting against your own interests, and the rich go laughing all the way to the bank. Our job is to say, let's focus on basic economic issues. How do we expand the middle class? This is a great country. Why is it the average American is working longer hours for low wages than 30 years ago? Let's talk about that.
And decades later, they haven't changed a thing. Same policies, same tactics. It's been happening for a very long time. But that's why it's so important to build working class solidarity so people understand that trans people and immigrants and people of color are exploited by the same system that exploits everyone else. And if you show up for them, they're going to show up for you. Liberation for them is liberation for the rest of us. You have their back, they'll have your back. And the same is true for every other marginalized community. This is why there's so much power in Bernie Sanders' message, because it's antithetical to the divisive politics of fascists like Donald Trump. If working class people stop hating each other, they become a force to be reckoned with. It's why we have to counter racism with anti-racism. It's why we have to fight intolerance with tolerance. Explain to working class people that trans people aren't the enemy. Fostering this kind of unity is exactly what Bernie Sanders and leftists like myself are trying to do, because that is the antidote to fascism. So I appreciate that so many people, including the Pod Save Bros, are coming around to Bernie Sanders' politics. You know, it's more moral, it's more persuasive, it's just better politics than whatever corporate Democrats have been doing now for decades. If you want Democrats to win, you opt for that. And listen, they want Democrats to win. I want fascists to lose. There's no reason why we shouldn't be working together. I get that liberals and leftists don't always see eye to eye because we have fundamental disagreements on policy and worldviews. But I think that to defeat fascism, it is necessary that we form a coalition to stop fascism. And all that I ask is that liberals help us once in a while, do what they can to help politicians like Mamdani when they still have the chance to attain power, not after it's already too late, when the threat that they pose to the system, the establishment, is no longer there. So help us help you, and maybe we'll be able to crush these fascist fucks once and for all and actually save the country.
So there we are. Mike Figueredo is, I just think he's excellent. His takes are always good. A lot of people would probably find them sort of extreme left, but I find them consistently good left. So I wanted to show you Mike's take, and to point out that, you know, that Bernie Sanders clip of him talking to high school students, I think that was about 20 years ago. Might have been even longer. It might have been getting close to 30 years ago. The conservative agenda never changes. And on that point, I just want to go to this. I want to have a look at this YouTube channel. Now, we apparently have a new political party in Australia called the Trumpet of Patriots. Now, this is the video on this channel is 3 years old. This Trumpet of Patriots, TOP party, I had to double check to make sure this was Australian, and that it wasn't some bunch of lunatics in the US. But no, this is a 3-year-old YouTube channel for the Trumpet of Patriots party with the Southern Cross logo and a lion. We don't have many lions in Australia except in zoos. And they have 26 subscribers, and they have put up one video. Wouldn't it be delicious if we watched the video? Let's do that. Bloody hell, that was an AI pig. Oh, 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 oh. Now this is how good this group is. So now this is a group of what I would call cookers. Right? This would be my my thought. Now have a look at this. Join the only party run by everyday. They left off everyday Australians. I assume that was the message they were trying to tell. Now that's just a bit of a teaser. Tomorrow I will show you what. Oh, actually, no, fuck it. We'll do it now. I'll just have to do a bit of editing on the fly. Okay, so this is 3-year-old video. Trumpet of Patriots. The YouTube channel is still here. While I'm here, I'll go to the website as well. This might break the sharing a little bit, but let's just see what happens. Okay, so we go to the website. Are we still up? Oh no, we're still up. That's good. I'll do it all in this one tab. That's good. Okay, so we've got a trumpetofpatriots.org. Okay, now so that website is what we've now got for this. Oh, good. I can do it all in this page. Good. Or have they taken down the ad? No, they haven't. Here we go. So I'm going off track. We'll get to Britain shortly. Let's check out these videos. March the 3rd. These all went up on March the 3rd, but they have been running them on TV, particularly this Two Genders one for weeks. Now, right-wing fringe fuckwittery, two genders. So attacking transgenders, too much immigration. They're the main themes so far. But we'll watch all these videos. Let's watch all of them. This is one that there's been a lot of flack going on. But let's check this out. This is the Two Genders video. Oh, is this? It hasn't come up yet. Oh, yeah, I knew this would break the sharing. So I do have to. Sorry about that. The limitations of this platform that I'm using. Okay. Two genders. Share. Okay. Now we have the great pleasure of watching one of. Well, we'll find out who it is. Let's go.
There are two genders, male and female. We don't want men in women's sports. We don't want males dressed as females confusing our children in schools. All children should be entitled to a normal, safe environment in our schools and in our public toilets. All children must be entitled to decide who they are when they become adults.
I mean, for fuck's sake. They go straight to the public toilets bullshit. Fucking hell. Okay, where are the other videos? Go back to home. I have a bit of fun with this because okay, so that one. Okay, so the next thing they're always upset about is immigration. So let's get to that. Oh, don't tell me this is not. I have to do this again. Remove from some. Yeah, so remove this layer. Then I'll share this tab instead. Share the screen. Gee, this is it. Too much immigration. Too much immigration. Here we go. We don't want to miss out on this banger. I'm sure it's a banger.
Governments have pretended Australia is in good shape by using immigrants' wealth as the government's achievement. Too much immigration, however, overwhelms our infrastructure, our housing, schools, hospitals, creates congestion and destruction of our communities. Australia should be for all Australians living here. We will put Australians first and we will make Australia great again.
Well, what do you know? Make Australia great again. So they're going. I mean, we're not Trumpy. We're not a Trumpy party, but we are very interested in being Trumpy. Fantastic. All right, there's one more, and I've seen both of those on the TV before, but I have not seen All Australians Are Equal before. So I'll just get this one up, and I'll have to go on. And I'll have to do the sharing thing again, no doubt. Now, the other thing that they are very consistent in or with is they can articulate problems. They're very good at articulating problems. They are not so good at advancing anything that looks like a solution. And the reason they do that is that they can get people riled up and angry, but they don't have to advance anything that could be open to criticism. Like, how would you cut immigration? They just say, cut immigration. Who are you going to cut? How are people going to fill the jobs when most of what's driving our immigration growth is skilled migration? And then the question is, and I used to do a podcast about migration with a very, very learned immigration migrant. You can look it up, the Migrating to Australia podcast. They will counter with, oh, but we let the migrants bring their families. Okay. So if you want a skilled migrant to fill the skill shortages that we have in this country and every other developed nation, by the way, and if every other competitor nation says, sure, if you come here and you are successful in your job for 2 or 4 years, then you can bring your family. Because if you want to move to a new country, you'd like your mum to be there and maybe your sister and her kids. And okay, so that's something that people want. But if Australia says, no, you can't bring your family, but the UK says you can, or Canada says you can, or New Zealand says you can, or Germany says you can, where are those skilled migrants going to go? So it's an incredibly simplistic conversation that they like to have. But it's interesting that they've borrowed the branding and the name, or they've no doubt purchased it, from the anti-vax cookers who were against everything that the governments were doing to try and stop us having a New York-style mass death occurrence with COVID. And there's no doubt some of our freedoms were limited, but they weren't limited permanently. And we actually came out of it pretty good. Anyway, let's have a look at this. No doubt this will be a banger too. And who are they appealing to? They're appealing to the old who believe that we must be honouring the flag of another nation on our flag. And of course, they always do the Southern Cross, which is some loopy symbolism about freedom, I guess. But I'll go into a deep dive on this tomorrow. But let's not miss out on the fun here.
We respect all Australians, but we don't need to individually...
That's bullshit. You don't respect all Australians.
Acknowledge people we don't know and have never heard of. We must respect all people who made Australia what it is.
Oh. Let's go back to that. Key phrase
We don't
here.
know and have never individually acknowledged. We don't need to Australians, but respect all Australians, but we don't need to individually acknowledge people we don't know and have never heard of. We must respect all people who made Australia what it is today, a wonderful country.
Oh, now that is so unbelievably racist in its tenor, but it's coded messaging. We don't need to individually acknowledge people we have never met and have never heard of. They are talking about the welcome to country. They are talking about white, or let's say immigrants, whether they be recent immigrants or people like myself, who I think my family is six generations, I think, on one side, Australian settlers. But we're the privileged. We're the invaders. It's not my fault what happened years and years and years and years ago, but we can acknowledge it. I can acknowledge that the land that I am sitting on at the moment is Wurundjeri country. It was never ceded. It was conquered. The Wurundjeri people, the indigenous people of Australia, are dispossessed. There has never been a treaty signed, unlike in New Zealand, and I believe Canada too. I think there is a treaty for different provinces in Canada. Now, this is dead set racist coded language aimed at othering Indigenous Australians and making out that they get a special deal. They get things that the rest of us don't get.
We don't need to individually acknowledge people we don't know and have never heard of. We must respect all people who made Australia what it is today, a wonderful country that includes people from every nation around the world. All Australians are equal under the Southern Cross. We need to make Australia great again.
She's obviously never read any of the Closing the Gap documents. Unbelievably stupid. And see how they put a pretty middle-aged or later-aged lovely white lady in a pale blue suit and a long black blonde hair and her nice glasses. She's a fucking out-and-out racist. Fuck this. I didn't think I'd get so angry about this. Oh, boy. I'll tell you what, I'm going to end up on this. I'll leave Owen Jones and the rest of his politics for another day. I'm gonna do a bit of a deep dive on these idiots and clip up some stuff for tomorrow. And I might, and if I can find the clips from New Zealand and the UK and see how the same terminology is being deployed everywhere. I'll see if I can find out who the consultants and the strategists are for this mob. I'll also introduce you to the two billionaires that are fronting this. So I hope you've enjoyed that. Really appreciate that you have taken the time to join me and to watch. If you're interested in the Discord, because I'm going to be spending time in the Discord, and that's where we can have conversations that open and honest, but not necessarily broadcast to the world. They're not just another podcast Discord. It's not just another podcast.com/Discord. Also, the Bird Emergency has a Discord, thebirdemergency.com/Discord. Thanks for being with me. I'm Grant. I am a bird nerd. I am a plant nerd. And as you can see, I'm a bit of a grumpy old bastard. And I am sick of the way we're being spoon-fed bullshit and that we're all lapping it up. Please make sure you are subscribed. Very impressed. I looked at my Bird Emergency stats, and 70% of viewers are subscribed. That was cool. This channel's brand new, so following or sharing or liking obviously will help me a ton. And the socials that I am active on, basically it's Blue Sky, and you'll find me at thebirdemergency.com/Blue blue sky. I'm Grant. I'll see you later. See you back here tomorrow on the next live stream. Hooroo!